Okay.
I'm going to go ahead and start the webinar.
Okay. Let's wait till people come in.
Perfect. Hello, everyone. We're going to wait and give everyone a minute to kind of get in here and get finalized. Awesome. I think we should be ready to start if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, Erica.
Yeah. Hey, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, Tips on Pitching. I'm Erica. I'm the Business Development Manager of the US on the West Side and also Canada. And today I'm joined by my colleague, Max, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, so I am Max Bratt. I'm our BD manager on the Eastern US. So Eric and I are both responsible for working primarily with the startups, helping them obviously ensure that they're getting registered for Resi as well as preparing, not just for the partnering aspect of the conference, but also for the pitching, whether that be pitching, individually outside of the conference or more specifically, I think this webinar will focus on our IPC track, which we'll go into it a little bit. But Eric and I get to work a lot with the startups and help them directly in that manner. So we're excited that everyone is attending today. I know probably a lot of you guys are familiar with LSN and with Resi, but we're looking forward to it, and we'll dive in a little bit deeper here. So we can go ahead and kind of just get started. Um,
Yeah.
today,
And if anyone has any questions, just put it in the chat and we can answer it.
yeah, and so we'll save some time at the end to cover any questions as well as if we see stuff popping up throughout the webinar. We'll go ahead and get answered. We'll do a quick introduction to start, and then we'll move on more specifically into the Innovators Pitch Challenge. So that's the pitch track that we host at our Resi conferences. Erica will share more, not just about the logistics, but kind of a general overview of what that looks like, as well as what makes a good presentation, and then some of our best tips on pitching materials, messaging, and things that we've been able to kind of see have worked well with the investors and resonated well. And then lastly, we will touch on preparing for investor questions that will follow the IPC, not just at the actual pitch session, but also in meetings to come. So to quickly introduce LSN, I know a lot of you guys have been to Resi conferences before. I'm going to go ahead and start with the middle tab, which is our Resi Partnering Conference. So Resi stands for Redefining Early Stage Investments. That is the conference we host to help early stage life science companies meet capital investors as well as strategic partners. So when I say we are early stage focused in the life science avenue, we work with therapeutics, medical device, digital health, and diagnostic companies, anyone in those sectors, and then early stage. So that could be anything from pre-seed to Series B, with the kind of our main source being seed and Series A investment opportunities, not just with the startups we bring, but also with our network of investors. So we see a lot of our investors kind of finding that sweet spot in their check size. So this is a conference that is a 3-day format. So we do one day in person, followed by 2 days of virtual partnering, where you're able to arrange meetings not just with those capital investors, but also some of the other strategic partners involved. They're 30-minute meeting slots. And of course, you're able to not only just kind of upload your materials and get in front of investors, but it's really kind of the best way to actually launch your fundraising campaign and get exposure to the investors that we bring. So the conference really stands out because we have a 1-to-1 ratio of both startups to investors, meaning that there's kind of a level of informality in the best way possible that with so many investors actually present within the early stage ecosystem, it really is a huge collision factor. So whether that be arranging meetings ahead of time for either virtual partnering or in-person partnering, or even just bumping into someone at the actual event, it's really easy to get in front, get introductions, and as I'm sure many of the startups here kind of know, it is never too early to get on the radar screen of an investor, whether that's an angel group, family office, or a VC. They always want to see you hitting milestones, and it's never really too early to get in front of them. So our next upcoming conferences are going to be Resi London in December, as well as Resi JPM in January. And that kind of leads me into the next avenue in which Life Science Nation operates is going to be our investor and company database. So I mentioned that we source a lot of our investors and we bring, I think at Resi Boston, which we hosted 2 weeks ago now, we had about 360 investors present. And it was our 49th conference. So obviously LSN is no stranger to the investment network. And we've obviously built up a huge network of capital investors and strategic partners in the early stage life science ecosystem. And through that, we've been able to source them into our investor database. So that database is sold separately. And what it is a combination of 3,100 different investment funds, as well as over 10,000 different contacts of people that we know. A lot of them have been to our Resi conference and are kind of within our network. And what stands out in that database is we really pride it on quality. We have a full-time team of 5 investor research analysts who are constantly interviewing these investors. So when they come to our conference, their ticket in is that they have to get on the phone and speak with our investment research team, where we can then ask them really detailed questions about their funds to not only ensure that they are who they say they are and that they're actively representing an early stage fund, but also so that we can get information on that fund that is going to be a lot more specific than what you might find online. Investment funds like to kind of be broad so they don't turn away any deal flow, but our team is able to ask them, questions on their asset allocation preferences, sectors, subsectors of interest, if they have any company or management team requirements, and then lastly, what is the best way to get in contact? So that's a really, really powerful tool that we have in that database. And it's operated outside of Resi. So if anyone listening today is interested in seeing a demo of that, both Erica and myself would be happy to do so. You can feel free to email us. We'll pull up our emails again at the end of the presentation, but we'll also be sending a follow-up message. So feel free to kind of just respond directly to that. And then the last avenue in which LSN operates is going to be our entrepreneur education. So what that is we provide education to, it's typically cohorts of companies. So we've done a lot of work with governments and regional organizations in the past, whether it be, examples of the NIH, NIHC department, BETA is the Brisbane Economic Development Agency out in Australia. And we've done some work with some of their cohorts of startups who are really now starting to launch kind of their fundraising campaign, whether that be help with branding and messaging. We will actually go in, we'll look at company materials, we'll look at investor outreach strategies and give our 2 cents because we've worked with a lot of companies and we have also worked with a lot of investors. So we kind of know exactly what they're looking for. And we're able to actually help develop those materials and that investment outreach strategy in a way that yields really, really high quality results. And that kind of leads me into the first portion of today's actual webinar, which is going to be about the importance of knowing your audience in the IPC pitch track and in any regard whenever you're pitching your company. It is important to obviously know your audience. So our audience at LSN is going to be across the 10 different categories of investors. I won't read it out to you, but you can see listed on kind of the left-hand side of the screen is going to be all of the investors and the investment types within LSN's network. What I will point out is specifically angel groups, early stage VCs, and family offices. That is really kind of the main chunk of investors that we have coming to our Resi conference. However, we do track across all 10 types and we see groups of all sorts, whether it be, private equity, hedge funds, government organizations, corporate venture capitals, or other large pharma and biotech strategics. This big logo splash on the page is going to be examples of people that we not have only worked with, but have been to Resi conferences and we have good relationships with. So if you come to a Resi conference, you could expect to run into some of these groups and get partnering meetings and get in front of their investment teams. And one of the things that I do want to briefly point out, even though it's not mentioned on the screen, is going to be diving even a little bit deeper into knowing your audience, specifically on the VC side. So a lot of the startups kind of have somewhat of a hesitancy to maybe transition out of angel groups and family offices in that seed stage and start talking to some early stage VCs. And I think the reason for that, and Erica, I'll get your opinion here in a second too, but there's kind of the notion that companies in your stage might be a little too early for VCs. And I think in reality, that's just not necessarily the truth because there's also different flavors of VCs. So obviously there's the late stage VCs that are interested in providing, a big check size for growth capital and whether that be manufacturing, they're really interested in scaling and growth. There's also going to be middle stage VCs that are, they want more data, whether that be phase 2B and beyond. They want de-risked companies. But then that leaves a whole separate category of VCs, which are the early stage VCs. And those are the ones that are in our network and they're open to early stage opportunities. So whether that be pre-IND, pushing into clinical, really the early stage VCs, because their theme is that they're going to take a small amount of money and they're going to spread it out to a large number of companies. And really, if one or two of those companies pan out, then that's a win for them. And that means that they're obviously more willing to have some freedom with their investment flexibility, whether that be sector or subsector. but they're able to kind of write a check for a smaller amount that might match typically what you're going to see in a lot of the companies that we work with.
Yep. And then adding on to that, there are obviously a bunch of investors out there, ones that are more local to your region, and then others that are more global. And I like to say, if even if they're not a fit now, it doesn't mean that they're not a fit later on down the line. So it's good to keep in touch with really any investor that you meet during your fundraising journey.
Yeah, that is really important, Erica. And so next, we're going to look a little bit closer at actually Resi at a glance, and more specifically where the audience kind of fits in there. So I had mentioned before that we do bring pretty close to a 1-to-1 ratio of startups to investors. You can look a little bit closer at kind of the breakdown of, what investor types are there. You can see, again, a large chunk are going to be the early stage VCs, as well as angels and family offices. When you look at the startups in our network, it's kind of split. About 40% of those startups are going to be therapeutic, while maybe 25% are going to be medical device, and then the rest are going to be split between those other sectors in which we operate, which are digital health diagnostics and then R&D services and tools. But these are not the only groups attending Resi. So we also, of course, have tech hubs, service providers, nonprofits, government organizations, research groups, anyone who has interest in the early stage life science sector. We really invite them to come to Resi and be a part of the ecosystem. Because again, they can benefit from a lot of what we have to offer, whether it be the face-to-face partnering, the investor and panel workshops, or the pitch sessions that we also host at Resi. It is a partnering conference, but we do fill it with other activities throughout the day. So those investor panels it's a really powerful tool to sit there and listen to investors speak on specific topics. We'll run a full track of that throughout the day with, 5 to 6 different investors representing funds, speaking on whether it be indication specific. So, if you're interested in listening to investors speak on what the medical device investment landscape might look like moving forward. That's just one example. We also have company pitch sessions. That is the IPC track that we're going to talk a little bit more about today. But that is an opportunity to actually get in front of a panel of investor judges, pitch your company, and get really high quality feedback. And through all of these different aspects, we've estimated that Life Science Nation has helped over 400 companies raise $5 billion throughout, it says 35 conferences. We've actually done 49 now. So throughout that time, we've helped companies raise over $5 billion. And Erica, I'll let you talk a little bit more specifically about Resi London.
Okay, thanks, Max. Yeah, so there will be two upcoming Resi conferences, one in London and the other in San Francisco during JP Morgan Healthcare Week, which means there will be two opportunities for you to participate in the Innovators Pitch Challenge. All of our Resi conferences per year follow the format of the first day being in person with workshops, panels, and pitch sessions, followed by 2 days of virtual partnering. For Resi in London, it will take place early December, so December 4th, 5th, and 6th. We'll have panels about seed funds, early stage therapeutics, medical devices, and then the afternoon will be filled with just the Innovators Pitch Challenge. We have QR codes that you can scan here to apply for the IPC. And for Resi London, it will be £14.95. But if you decide not to pitch, that's totally fine. You can still be added to the partnering platform by purchasing a partnering ticket. I'd like to say, some startups decide to participate in the IPC and others prefer not to. It really just depends on if you're ready to, be in a live Q&A session in front of an audience of investors. And if you want to get feedback, because the judges will fill out a scoring sheet throughout your pitch session. Next slide. And then now this is our agenda for one of probably our largest Resi conference throughout the year. And that's a Resi JPM during the JP Morgan Healthcare Week in San Francisco. You can see it is the same format with in-person panels, like corporate VCs, women's health, medical devices, etc. And then we'll have pitches throughout the entire day, not just the afternoon, and then workshops throughout the day as well. The IPC is a little bit more expensive at Resi JPM just because it is a larger conference. And so we're typically forecasting like 600 investors to attend. And the price for the pitch challenge here is $37.95. So all pitch packages, they include a 3-day partnering ticket. So you'll be able to you'll be added to the partner platform to book meetings with other Resi attendees. You'll also get an in-person pitch slot and a space to host a poster and or exhibition table, which I'll talk more about in the next slide.
Awesome. And one thing too that I will touch on here is Erica had mentioned there's going to be about 600 investors at Resi JPM. So this typically is one of our bigger conferences a year. And because of that, we do kind of see the IPC pitch track sell out rather quickly. There are still slots open. However, we would highly encourage you guys to start registering if you're interested in doing it as soon as possible, just because we are going to see those tracks sell out relatively soon. So we'll move on to the next slide.
Okay, so now we're going to take a deeper dive into the Innovators Pitch Challenge and answer any common questions about that. So you can expect startups in what we like to call the 4Ds: drugs, devices, diagnostics, and digital health, as well as R&D services. And these startups are typically raising anywhere between 25K up until 50 million US dollars in capital. So really like a pre-seed round up until Series B rounds. So if you fall in this criteria, definitely consider applying. And if you know anyone interested, please send them the application link as well. But besides that, we do host many webinars to help you get prepared for the Resi conferences as well as the IPC. And you can find the list of the webinars on the homepage of our Resi conference. And we'll also have, Max and I to help guide you along the way. I've met with founders that, where it's their first time pitching at Resi. And I've also met founders where they've pitched several times because they find that it's a good way to gain exposure. Max, anything you want to add to this?
Yeah, I would just add to what Erica had said that Erica and I are both, our job is to work with you guys and make sure that you guys are prepared to do this. So for those companies that do get registered to pitch, we're really want to be good resources for you guys moving forward and leading up to that pitch. So whether it be jumping on a call to maybe listen to your 4-minute pitch or reviewing some of your materials, um, either printed materials for the poster or the table or really whatever. Erica and I are good resources for you guys who are maybe pitching for the first time or pitching again and just want to sharpen your pitch a little bit. We plan on actually being really active helping those companies prepare. And we'll probably do a webinar for these IPC pitching companies ahead of Resi, whether it be Resi London or Resi JPM, just to make sure that you guys are, 100% ready, and whether it be answer any questions that you guys have, listen to the pitches, or however we can help, let us know. So we'll move forward to the next slide if you're ready, Erica.
Yep. Okay, so this next slide is about the IPC application. Of course, it's a QR code here that you can scan. It'll take you directly to the pitch homepage, which contains pitch applications to both our London and San Francisco Resi events. The pitch application is pretty straightforward. We submit a company description, a headshot, executive summary, pitch deck, and then you pay a fee. And then during the recruitment process to invite investors to judge the pitch session, we'll send your pitch materials to them beforehand so that they have a better idea of your company and they can develop more meaningful questions during the live Q&A. And then 2 deadlines to keep in mind. The Resi London application is due Friday, October 25th. And the second deadline is for Resi JPM's Innovators Pitch Challenge, which is due Friday, November 8th. And just a reminder again that all pitch packages at Resi, they include a 3-day partnering ticket, as well as an in-person pitch slot and a space to host a poster/exhibition table. Next slide. Now, this slide is going into more detail of what to expect as a startup pitching in the IPC. So how it's run down, companies are grouped and assigned to a 1-hour pitch session and Q&A based on a similar sector/technology. So for example, we'll have like a therapeutics focused one, medical device, digital health, etc. And then each session has a panel of investor and industry expert judges, plus the audience. So it's open to all the Resi attendees. Each 1-hour session features 4 companies, and each company will have 4 minutes to pitch with slides and 9 minutes of Q&A with the panel of judges. The judges will fill out a scoring sheet to evaluate the best pitching company of each session. And then all the Resi attendees will get Resi Cash, which will be used to vote for the top 3 pitching startups. Next slide. Now, this slide is about, the Resi Cash. So as a startup pitching, you'll On top of getting to participate in the partnering platform and pitch in person, you'll also share an exhibition table with another startup to host either like a poster board, or if you have a physical device or software, you can showcase that at the table as well. And something that I want to highlight is Resi Cash. So when Resi attendees pick up their badge, they will each receive 5 pieces of Resi Cash to vote for the favorite pitching startup. Of course, you can vote for yourself, but make sure to convince any startups and other investors that you talk to vote for you as well. I think it's like a really fun game, and the top 3 winners do get free tickets to future Resi conferences so they can continue meeting other investors along the way.
Yeah, and we really want to encourage you guys to be active with this as well. We've always seen in the past that the winners of IPC are the ones who are actually using it as an opportunity to draw investors in. Don't just sit by your box and hope that an investor is going to come drop Resi Cash in your box. Go out and recruit them. Say, hey, come to my table. At Resi Boston this past time, we actually did the exhibition table instead of just a poster, and we received really, really good feedback. Both that it looked visually as well as that it was also really engaging for people to not only have their materials out and visible, but also to draw both investors and other startups and anyone in to actually learn more about your company. So go around throughout the day. We recommend that if you're going to do the IPC track to bring at least 2 people from your company. That way, obviously, you can have one kind of manning the table and speaking to the people who are going to be coming and voting and passing by. But you also want to have one person out recruiting people, networking, sharing their business card, saying, "Hey, I'm at table number whatever," and sending people towards your table where you can actually then really take advantage of not just the foot traffic, but also the visibility, because it really is a great deal to have that exhibition table. And we kind of encourage doing everything that you can to actually take advantage of it.
Awesome. And the next slide is about, why should you participate in the IPC? So of course you can have increased visibility for your company. And we feature your logo on our Resi website as well as LinkedIn. And the finalists and winners are announced in our newsletter that goes out every Thursday. And also there's like an opportunity for you to be in an interview with us that we showcase as well. Another reason why is that, of course, you get connection with the judges and the audience. And like we mentioned before, the top 3 companies will get future tickets to the Resi conferences. Yep. Now this slide, I would say it's pretty important about your 4-minute presentation. We know that 4 minutes is not a long time, but I kind of think of it as a 13-minute long pitch, because you get 4 minutes to pitch with slides, and then you get 9 minutes of Q&A from the investor judges. And the Resi conferences, it's an investor conference, not a scientific one. So this means that your pitch should be clear enough where anyone listening to it can understand it. Investors come from different backgrounds, some with a heavy science PhD background, and other come from more of a finance background. So just remember that pitching at Resi conferences, it should be good enough for you to get the initial meetings, and the investment/due diligence will come later on in other meetings. And I like to say there are 6 main components of what we like to highlight in a 4-minute presentation. The first one being the unmet need. So what problem are you addressing? What's your tagline, etc.? And then the second one is a market size. So clearly define the market that you're targeting. This could be the geography, industry, or any demographics that you're targeting. What's your total addressable market? So TAM, meaning present, the overall revenue opportunity if you were to achieve 100% market share. And this basically gives a high level overview of the market potential, as well as your serviceable available market, SAM, meaning the segment of the TAM targeted by your products and services, as well as the serviceable obtainable market, or the SOM, meaning the portion of the SAM that you can realistically capture in the near term, as well as any trends and growth. The third thing I'd like to highlight would be the competitive landscape. So of course, you can briefly mention key competitors and how they address the market, and then make sure to position your business in that context. I see that some startups, they say that they don't have any competitors, and investors don't really like to hear that. So just make sure that you do research on what your market is and how you're different from other companies in the space. The next part would be the milestones achieved, and this refers to any significant, goals or objectives that your business has successfully reached, such as, product development, market penetration, financial goals, and partnerships. The fifth thing that I'd like to highlight would be technology overview. And this is where you can describe the main technology used and its purpose, the unique features, user experience, and benefits, such as how efficient it is, how well it can be scaled, if it saves money, etc. And you can also provide a practical example or case study that demonstrates your technology in action. And you can also mention any planned, upgrades to your technology to show that you're really committed about any ongoing innovation. And then the last part here is to basically highlight one theme about your company. And this can be anything from your management team. So providing a background about, where they've previously done research, or worked at, any, milestones that they have achieved. And then any KOLs, funding to date, grants, etc. And then another thing that's not on the slide, but I like to have a summary slide in your pitch deck, just to highlight basically like an overview about your company so that when investors are reviewing your pitch deck, they can just go to that slide and just have the overview. Because as you know, investors are reviewing a bunch of executive summaries, a bunch of pitch decks when they're at these type of conferences. So making it easier for them to review it would be great.
Yeah,
And
and I know
then
a
next
lot.
slide, giving it.
Actually, I'm going to chime in real quickly too. And I know a lot of the startups out there might be kind of wondering how you could possibly fit all of this information into that 4-minute pitch. And again, I just want to kind of touch on the importance of covering everything from a high level. The investor that you're pitching to and the investment panel that we're going to have are not going to be really looking to dive deeply into any specific aspect. What they're really trying to do is qualify if this is an investment opportunity that is worth pursuing, and then they will pull in the right people to actually kind of enter due diligence. So whether it's, an investor that might come from more of a financial background, asking you a scientific question, they just want to quickly qualify it. And then if they do have more specific questions on whether it be the science or the finances, they will pull in the member from their team that's probably the best suited to actually have that conversation. So just make sure that you're touching on all of these from a high level, and you don't need to dig too in the weeds on any of them. But it is important to acknowledge all of these different aspects.
Yeah, just remember that Resi is an investor conference, not so much a scientific one.
Mhm.
So you'll be talking to more investors there. Yeah.
And we can now kind of look a little bit more specifically at some of the messaging tips that we'd recommend using to actually kind of achieve what we had just said. And this is going to focus more on positioning your pitch than it will, email messaging or messaging within our partner portal. We do offer a lot of coaching on that. I actually believe that we're going to be having an upcoming webinar. I think it's called um, Branding and Messaging that will touch a little bit more on that. We also have things like a template for email and email follow-ups, as well as even within our Resi survival guide that everyone gets as soon as they actually register for the conference. It's sent to them. There's examples of materials, whether that be executive summaries or pitch decks or tear sheets, that we can send out. And I'll make note to send that around to everyone in attendance today. But this is going to focus a little bit more on how you actually position your spoken pitch than that written material. And the first messaging tip that we're going to do is going to be to clearly describe your technology. And this is important because a lot of times, one of the very first things that you should be saying is going to be your tagline. And it's often kind of confused with a slogan. So we see a lot of startups who will, that first slide of their pitch will have their company logo and then a slogan that just touches way too broadly and doesn't actually give any clarity to what it is that they do. So an example of this would be instead of saying something like, my company has a proprietary treatment for many critical illnesses, it would be much more clear to say, we're developing an IND-ready small molecule asset for breast cancer by activating natural killer cells. And you can see that in that tagline, it not only touches on what the indication and technology are, but also the market. So it's clear that you are developing a therapeutic small molecule within the breast cancer oncology space. as opposed to kind of just throwing in a lot of buzzwords in that first example. You want to be clear and you want the investor to immediately know what it is that they're going to be looking at. So, of course, in doing so, it is also really important to be realistic with your statements. The first bullet point here says to know your competitors. Erica had mentioned this earlier, but it is a huge red flag to investors when a company says we have no competitors, because everybody has competitors. And that does not mean that they're doing exactly it is that your company is doing. Of course, there's going to be some differences, and there's going to be something that provides you with a competitive advantage. However, it is still really, really important to know the landscape that you're operating in and also be able to address that. So an example of this would be saying, instead of saying, oh, we have no competitors, you could say, oh, there is another company that is developing an asset in the breast cancer space. However, our small molecule is much more efficient, much more efficacy, and has lower toxicity. And being able to differentiate what really is that competitive advantage is going to be much more accurate and clear to investors than just trying to say that you have no competition. And that includes novel products because there are competitors and products that precede you. Whether it's a groundbreaking technology advancement or development, it is still important to kind of identify and draw into that competitive landscape. So the next tip that we have is going to be explain your current company status in detail. So this obviously means outline your current status and be specific with where you are, whether you're 8 to 12 months out of IND, whether you're looking to enter clinicals and what it takes to actually get there. Because it is really important to provide a strategic direction for your company, both in the short and the long term. So obviously you want clarity on, let's say you're raising a 10 million Series A. You want to make it known what that Series A will cover, whether it be pushing into clinicals or whatnot. And one way to do this is to have a Gantt chart. That's a really powerful visual tool that kind of can align everything, not just with strategic vision, but also show the capital necessary, the milestones that you plan on achieving throughout that time period, and put it all in one place, not just to provide clarity for your company, but especially for the investors in the room who really want to see return on their investment. And that doesn't mean an immediate revenue return. That can be in the term of milestones. So they want to know that if they're going to be providing you with Series A funding, what exactly are they going to receive out of that, and what milestones is that going to push your company towards? You also want to avoid ambiguous statements. So something like saying CEO is an experienced entrepreneur. That doesn't really provide a lot of detail. Instead, you want to highlight the actual specifics, and you want to be specific. So say the CEO is an experience. He has 8 years in the therapeutic space. He's received multiple exits. And then you can even touch on not just maybe his education, whether he's an MBA, whether she's a PhD, where they come from, but also if they have any specific areas of expertise, any publications, anything that's really worth noting that provides some credibility is definitely worth addressing. And then messaging tip 3 kind of bleeds into 2 as well. And you really do want to summarize both on the near and long-term strategies. So you want to state your current standing and provide what steps you are currently taking to reach those milestones. And one thing that's not actually mentioned on this slide, but I do want to talk about is more specifically the long-term strategy. So obviously, if you're an early stage company, you don't need to have your exit plan in concrete set, because it's going to change. It's inevitable. But you still want to show that you have some understanding of what that might look like. So obviously, whether that be an IPO or even if you're looking to be bought out by maybe a bigger pharma company, you should have an understanding of maybe some companies similar to yours that have been bought out before, or some of those larger pharmas that are actually buying companies and assets similar to what it is you're creating. Because that shows investors that you've thought through and you have a deep understanding of not just the marketplace, but also what it takes to actually scale in a manner that will provide that exit. So it's really important to just show that you've done your research and you have an understanding of the marketplace. And in order to do so, you also need to summarize some key relationships. So you want to focus on any key opinion leaders, medical centers, big pharma, clinical, or even manufacturing partners that you actually have. Because again, that shows that you have an intent to scale, which is really kind of the number one thing that investors are looking for. is the ability to scale and reach those milestones. So if there is anybody on your team, whether that be full-time, part-time, on the advisory board, or just in any fashion that you think is an important aspect of helping you achieve those milestones, you want to touch on that and you want to make it clear that you have that vision in place. You also, of course, want to touch on any patents you have. So whether that be listing out the patents that you have, whether it's 10, 15, 20, or even zero. If you have zero patents, it's important to also show that you have applications maybe filed or you're planning to file, or just show that there is a plan in place to actually put some legality on the patents that you're have for your own and you've already filed and been awarded, or again, you're planning to file. Just show that you have some vision and some strategic mindset moving forward to actually help you reach those milestones. And providing strategy is, of course, better than a simple yes or no answer. If an investor asks you, do you have any patents in place? Um, yes is a good answer, but it's not as good as saying, yes, we have XYZ that's going to help us grow in this regard. So if you have that information, show it off because it's a really important part of your company. And it's important to expand on. And it actually has, of course, a huge implication for the investor. Messaging tip number 4 is provide enough information, but do not go overboard. Again, it is a 4-minute pitch followed by the 9 minutes of Q&A. So if you play your cards right, it should be closer to a 13-minute pitch because you have the 4 minutes of slides in front of you, but the next 9 minutes are really an open dialogue. So you want to, in that initial 4 minutes, summarize everything and even lead the investors into asking some questions. Because that is an open dialogue in which you're actually answering exactly what it is that they want to hear. So there's going to be 5 to 6 investor judges on that panel that they're representing active funds who are investing specifically in your sector. So that is a fantastic opportunity to actually get in front of investors who could be a fit. And at the very, very least, there's going to be at least 10 to 15, 20 or 30 other investors in the room who have probably gone in ahead of time and said, I want to attend this specific session and listen to these companies pitch because the funds they're representing are actively investing in companies similar to your own. So that is a great opportunity to actually present that information. But again, you don't want to go overboard. You want to provide, we call it a movie trailer, in which you can then encourage the judges to go forward and plan that next meeting. Your pitch deck and your executive summary should complete your application and address the issues discussed above, meaning that whether it's in your application to the IPC or if it's in your actual IPC pitch, those are complementary materials, meaning that they should build onto your pitch. And one other best practice thing that we do want to include is, let's say you touch on those 6 aspects that Erica had mentioned earlier in your pitch and, in 7 or 8 slides. We would highly recommend also including an appendix at the end of your actual pitch, because again, the judges are going to have questions that they want answered. So when you can say, explain it briefly in the 4-minute pitch, a judge then asks you a question, and then you can move to a separate slide in the back of your presentation that might explain the science a little bit more thoroughly, or even touch on some of the patents that you have, and really just provide a little bit more depth on that question that could be asked. That's a really powerful way of not only showing that you, again, have that strategic vision that we had mentioned earlier, but taking advantage of the question and that open dialogue that's going to be found in that 9-minute Q&A session. Erica, do you have anything that you'd like to add to any of those tips that I'd given?
Nope, that's pretty good.
Awesome. And again, now we can move on to some of just the potential topics that the investors might ask, because Eric and I have set in on hundreds of these pitches, so we know exactly what the investors are looking for. And we really do see kind of questions in all different aspects of the company. One of the most common is going to be questions on the technology. So a lot of times investors may want to know if there's more info on the product, how it addresses a specific market need, as well as they obviously want indication and some awareness on validating any data or milestones. That second bullet there, specifically on the data, is a great thing to have in the appendix. Because frankly, you don't want to bore them with a huge chart in the middle of your presentation. Instead, include that information in the appendix, and then lead them into asking that question. Because it will happen. They will ask you a question on the technology, and when you can then pull up validating data that shows that you have what you say you have, That obviously is really, really impressive for investors to see and is likely to encourage meetings. Um, Again, they could also ask if there's any other potential applications for the technology, whether that be a separate market segment or even a separate indication in which you could operate. That's also important to address. We recommend highlighting the primary, whether it be the primary asset or the primary indication in the presentation and really focusing on that. However, you should absolutely mention if there's growth opportunities, whether in a separate market segment or a separate indication, include that information as well. And then potential questions in the market and competition. They may ask you to get a little bit more specific on the market size. So one example would be if you're a therapeutic and say, oh, we're operating in the cancer indication. That is so broad, and I'm sure everyone here knows there's so many different types of cancer that you really need to be able to narrow down exactly what it is, whether that be breast cancer or lung cancer, and show kind of if you have metrics to support the size of that, not just in terms of potential revenue and potential market size financially, but just showing a little bit more specific that you've done your research on that sector is going to have a big impact, as well as being able to indicate the potential barriers of entry that are associated with entering that, whether that be regulatory pathways or even just positioning as a company. You want to show that you understand the competitive landscape and that you understand not only just the current standard of care, but also the other technologies that are currently in development within that market. Regulatory and reimbursement are huge, huge kind of discussion points, um, especially if you're putting forward a drug or a device that is in need of FDA regulation. Investors are going to want to know exactly what pathway you plan on filing with, and what the timeline on that is going to be, what kind of financial capital or runway you're going to need to actually push through potential clinical trials, because that has a huge impact not just on the valuation of your company, but also the runway that's needed to actually provide an effective investment. Because the one thing that investors are not going to want to do is they're not going to want to fund you just for you to have to turn around and re-raise again. Investors want you to be able to hit milestones, which means that once you've done, the 12 to 18 months of fundraising, you need a market runway to actually then be able to operate and run your company and hit those milestones. So they really want it clearly written out. Again, a Gantt chart is a great way to do that, but showing that pathway that it takes. Of course, there's also questions on the fundraising plan and the path to exit. We had touched on these a little bit ago with the use of funds and the Gantt chart, showing not only how financially you kind of align timeline-wise, but also where that matches with your milestone. And again, having that future strategy long-term, whether it be an acquisition or in-house sales or an IPO as a potential exit plan, is really important because, again, they're investors, so they know that it's never too early to get on kind of the investor's radar. So if you plan on maybe selling out to a large pharma or a strategic in that manner, show that you've done the considerations and that you've positioned yourself in a way that actually provides beneficial and potential opportunities to kind of come forward. And then the last thing that we see a lot of questions on is going to be the management team. I think this is one of the most commonly asked questions because investors in the early stage ecosystem know that when you're developing a technology or a drug or a device, it is bound to change a little bit. And what they really, really want is to see a management team that may have experience or particularly expertise in the field that is capable of navigating those changes. Whether that be navigating the clinical pathways, they want to see experience that, for them, it is not just an investment in your company and then a withdrawal. It is a really long-term project. When you take an investment in a company, you are agreeing to work with them for years. So they want to see that they are not just investing in a company, but they're investing in your team. And therefore, it's important to not only highlight, obviously, the experience and expertise you have, but also any potential other key opinion leaders you have. On the board of advisory, on your board, in your team directly, show them exactly the team that they're investing in. And so that summarizes a lot of what we talked about and kind of hopefully best prepares you guys to actually pitch, whether it be at IPC or pitch your company just through the partnering at Resi. At Resi London or at Resi JPM, both IPCs are going to be fantastic opportunities to get in front of investors. And we hope that the some of the tips that we share today will help not only with the pitch, but also just with the partnering as a whole.
Yeah, and one thing I want to add is there's going to be pitch sessions throughout the entire day at a Resi conference. So if you want to join one before your pitch session just to see what investors are asking, it would be good practice for you and helpful overall. So, and we're
Awesome.
here to help. Max and I are here to help you with your pitch materials, your investor outreach strategy, anything like that. So just reach out to us, and we're here to help.
Yeah, so I want to circle back quickly to this first page. Obviously, you can see both Erica and I have our email addresses up here. Please feel free to reach out. And Erica, I'm not sure if are there any questions that have kind of been asked? I am sharing my screen, so I can't really see.
Just one about the slides. We will be sharing the slides afterwards. Just yeah, make sure to keep an eye on that
Yeah, so
in
we
your
will be sharing
email.
these slides as well as I had mentioned. We'll send around the survival guide and some of the more specific messaging templates that could be useful. But if anybody else has questions, please feel free to ask them.
Yep.
We'll give it a minute to see if any come in. Any questions? If not, you guys have our emails, and we would be more than happy to respond to you, whether it be in the follow-up that I'll send out or just directly. Please feel free to message us. Oh, looks like we
So we
might have.
got another cost of investors list. Um, yeah, so I guess for that, we have basically two different ways where you can get list of investors. One way is through the Premier Partnering Upgrade at a Resi conference, and that's a $500 USD. And another way is to actually access our investor database, which Max talked about that earlier in the webinar. And that's basically the database separate from Resi. It's a monthly subscription, ranges from $350 to $500 per month for a minimum commitment of 6 months. And that will get you access to basically like over 3,000 investors in our network. Max, anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would just say that both of those are really good opportunities to not just get information and the list of investors. It also includes their contact information and includes kind of that in-depth
Yeah.
mandate material that I had mentioned earlier. The mandate is just our terminology for their investment thesis, and that is what we track directly from those interviews we do with them. So you'll get both their contact information and that in-depth look at their fund through either the Premier Partnering or the investor database that we sell. And again, if you'd want a demo on that, Eric and I would be happy to, complimentary demo and see some investors that could be a good fit for your companies.
And then adding on to that, investors do attend Resi for free. And basically, as return, we ask them if they want to be added to the database. And that's how we also get all the information from them about their contact information, sectors and subsectors of interest, allocation information, all of that. So we really try to keep all the information about our investors updated either through the Resi platform or our investor database.
Awesome.
Next question: how early stage can a company be before attending Resi? Yeah, so it really just depends. We've had startups, or we've actually had like some scientists that are working in a lab and they're interested in learning more about the startup ecosystem and seeing how other founders are pitching. And so they do attend Resi uh, at that stage. Other companies, they are still very early, either like on the pre-seed level, haven't raised money yet, but are looking to come to Resi to actually meet investors for those initial conversations. Um, yeah, anything else you want to add to that, Max?
No, I mean, I think you're correct. You're exactly right, Erica. There's really no such thing as too early. Um, just because whether it's going to be who you're speaking with, obviously there's going to be a huge presence of both family offices and angels there that are, I mean, those are the groups that are open to the earliest stage investments. Um, and then at the very worst, you're going to be able to kind of see what you're getting into and kind of what the fundraising world looks like. Um, and that can be really, really important as you start to kind of create some relationships really early on with VCs or other groups that might be interested in you later down the road. They're gonna have wanted to see your company and see how you operate. So again, if you can meet them as soon as possible, that is going to be very, very beneficial.
Mhm. And the another thing to add to that, for the Resi conferences that we're having upcoming in London and JPM week, there will be other like life science events happening that same week. So just make sure to book your travel and hotel as soon as possible because it can get pretty pricey leading up to the dates.
Awesome. Well, if we don't have any more questions, again, we want to just say thank you to everyone who came. We're going to put both Eric and I have our emails up here. And again, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to email us.
Oh, we have actually another question. um, does the database provide info on whether an investor is open to seed funding or very early ideas? Um,
Yes. So the
yeah.
database touches we the database we say that when you're creating that target list of investors, what you need to get an accurate list because you don't want a list that's too big and you don't want one that's too small. What you need is sector, subsector, indication, and then stage of development. And that's going to show obviously that's going to be able to get the list of people who are qualified fits. And in there in that mandate information, it's going to touch on what stages the investor is willing to invest in. So again, our team who conducts those interviews will ask them that, and they'll be able to identify if the investment fund is open to pre-seed, seed, Series A, Series B, and really get a good understanding, not just of what stage they're on, but also we'll touch directly on kind of what their typical check size is.
Mhm. And then as part of the database, you can also filter out their investment stage preference. So there's like a seed, venture, growth, etc. that you can all filter out. If you I'm gonna send a link in the chat so you guys can run like a sample search of the investor database. I think that'll be pretty helpful. And then if you guys want to learn more about that, you can just book a meeting with Max and I. Put it in the chat. You can also do keyword searches. If there's like a seed or like Series A, if they're specific in that, Series B, you can filter out their allocation size, minimum revenue requirements, things like that.
Awesome. Well, I think that might be it with the questions now.
Okay, awesome.
All right. Well, thank you everyone again, and we look forward to seeing you at Resi.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.